Hi Terry, so great that you're here. And I think it makes sense to really just like start by looking at the first version, which would be the 7 day roguelike version that you made. Yeah, so let's talk about this version. You were participating in the 7 day roguelike jam, and you were just sitting there coming up with the idea, or did you have the idea a little bit beforehand even? Because it feels like already so complete, let's say. There are so many elements in there that are also in the final version, and we were wondering, did you just really come up with that idea on spot, or is that like a project you wanted to do for a longer time?
Well, it's kind of. I didn't really have a plan for exactly what I wanted to do. I very much stumbled into the core mechanics, but what I did want to do is make something inspired by Dream Quest, which was the initial
Yeah.
this is what I'm going to do for this jam. I'm going to take my aspirations to do something Dream Quest inspired and try to make something out of it in 7 days. I didn't really have much of a plan other than okay, there's going to be a dungeon, there's going to be enemies that you fight, and the dice thing was really just about doing something different within that genre. I didn't want to just do like a Dream Quest clone. I wanted to push those mechanics in a different direction. So the starting point was just it's a 7 day jam. I'm going to make some very silly Dream Quest inspired thing and see what happens. So I can see the video here on the Discord.
Yeah.
This is what the fights look like in the 7 day roguelike version. It's super rough. Literally line art for the equipment and the dice, and it's there's like 6 pieces of equipment in this build of the game. It's really rough, but you can sort of see the basic mechanics are there, the progression through the dungeon it's completable. There's only like a couple of different enemies, and the mechanics are very broken. But it's got the core things that I wanted in there, like the level up system here, where you build your character as you play through, and yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling here.
What what drove you to decide this is a game jam project that I want to continue working on? So what was your like why did you even continue working on this? How was this different than other projects you made?
Okay, part of it actually was because I'd released it. I went to a 7 day roguelike meetup in London at the time with a couple of other people who had participated, and I showed them what I worked on. And I wasn't actually going to submit it, but I was encouraged to submit it. They said, you should, even though this is a bit broken and unfinished, it's interesting, you should put it out there. And I did. And when it was out there, I sort of felt like, oh, it really is very rough, right? I think this is cool. I love the idea, but it is so broken and so simple and buggy, and the design is all over the place. And I really rushed across the finish line to get this ready. So even though I was quite excited about the concept of the game, I felt like embarrassed by the version that was out there, and I wanted to just improve that. At the start, it was all about trying to get it to a point where I wouldn't be ashamed of it or something.
But it's still cool that you then decided to put it out there, even though you felt like, oh, it's unfinished. I don't really want people to see it, but you still did it. And in the end, that was probably a really good decision, because you also instantly then got feedback, right, from the community that quickly built around or was built around it.
It was. It turned out to be a very good decision. It was kind of not one I thought a lot about. At the back of my mind, I had been thinking about starting a Discord, and this seemed like a good pretext to do that. So, so I'd done a combination of things, which is put this very early prototype out into the world, and also start a Discord to talk about it. And I was feeling excited about the project, but I just still think it was going to be like a medium-sized thing I spent a month and a half on, maybe, and it would just be a little freeware game.
Yeah, but let's jump to the next version actually and see how much changed already. Because we noticed also when we were looking at it that it's already pretty juicy. Also, this like the first version from the game jam and even this version, there's many things that are already animated, and they are like the pace is really nice and it's so fast. And sometimes even like when you play it for the first time, you're like, what's the enemy doing? What's this combination? Why am I dying? But then in the end, it turns out to be like a very nice pace. And how did you approach that? Were you deliberately adding juice already at that stage of development, or is that something you do just on the way because it also feels better for yourself, like when you're testing and so on? We were wondering, actually.
It's very much that I just did as I went. In fact, it's weird how much of the original 7-day roguelike code is just still in the game, like 2 years later.
Still,
like
yeah.
the animation code for the cards when they flick up across the screen and the dice movement, and a lot of this code is exactly the same now in the live version. It's sometimes it just happens like that. It was partly because I was using the tweening library as well, and I just wanted to try it out for the jam, so I implemented everything with that. And once I had done the work, it was sort of just done,
Mm-hmm. In this version, like the 0.3 version, you also added a currency and the money and so on. But and the shops. Actually, did you plan to do that even in the roguelike jam and you didn't have time for it, or did you add it because it was like this roguelike convention and you had to?
So at this stage in development, a lot of the decisions were just like inspired by Dream Quest. It took a while for me to break away from that. At a certain point in development, I was like, okay, I'm going to turn this into a big thing and push in my own direction. But at this point in the game, I was all like, well, Dream Quest has shops, and shops are interesting, that you have choices about what equipment you're going to get. And that's why I have them there.
Nice. But one of the biggest changes in this version actually is not visible to the player, because you started putting everything into sheets, so you read everything out of the sheets already, and this is so accessible actually. I feel like already in this version you can kind of tell that you also wanted other people to at some point look at it and maybe mod it. So was that the point why you decided to put everything in sheets and stuff?
Well, I was thinking about modding from quite early because the community aspect of this game was really fun. The dice board was getting really active around this time, and lots of people were playing it and had lots of good suggestions. And the way I was doing things like monsters and equipment was in source code. It was just like a big switch statement, and that was a mess. That was going to be unsustainable. So I moved everything to spreadsheets, which is a really fantastic approach. Something I hadn't really done before, in fact, and will definitely do again, because it's really nice to just be able to try out ideas by tweaking numbers in a spreadsheet and making a quick copy of one item and changing something and making a monster that's slightly different from another thing. Just having it all there in a really abstract form is, it was like a discovery for me with this game.
Nice. And with the Discord community, so they were also testing the newer builds that you were working on, and you just gave them, like, did you put them into zip files and put it into the Discord, or how did you contribute it?
There was nothing in advance. There was no testing build at that point. They literally played the game when it dropped, and bugs and all. That was fun. I'm not sure I would do it again because it was very stressful. But it really helped the game grow so fast.
Yeah, I can tell. Sometimes it must have been a little bit like also scary to work that closely with the community, and it can be really stressful to look at every bit of feedback that the community is giving, because you really value that feedback, and they're taking their time to sit there and write this to you, but you cannot like use everything. Were there some points where you just like were overwhelmed by all the feedback and you were like, I don't know how to process all this? Or
absolutely. Especially when the game started to get more complicated and I needed more time to do things. The pace of things slowed down pretty dramatically after the first few builds. I was doing a build a week at first, and then I was doing it every 2 weeks, and then it was like eventually it was every 2 months. and I was getting hundreds of like issues on my bug tracker, and that's still like full of really niche edge case things that I never solved.
Let's look at the next version, because I heard that the community had direct influences also to your design decisions, right? In the next version, we see the witch, and the witch is like a completely different character class than all the others before.
I am really, really proud of this class. I think it's the best thing in the game. If I had been developing this game in private and I had happened across the witch mechanics, probably I would have pivoted to just making a game about that, because I really love the way this works. I think it ends up feeling way more deliberate and fun, and really good witch runs tend to be nail biters, where you're thinking about every single spell cast and every action so carefully. And I just find it like by far the most fun class in the game for me. But the game is definitely stronger for having all 6 classes that are very different feeling. So, it's probably for the best.
Yeah, that's maybe right. So you just said it with the nail biting, but how much because the game is both, right? It's very accessible actually and generous also for new players, but it's also challenging. Like, the further you progress in the game, you really have to understand the systems and everything. And we wanted to know, how much is the game for you like skill based, or how would you describe your game in that niche?
I guess my motivation for the design was mostly about pushing this basic system in as many different ways as possible. So I was really interested in the ways in which you could vary this dice assigning gameplay.
So would you say it's also more about understanding as a player the different characters, because they bring a lot with them? So it's they not only have the dice, but they also have like their little personalities and everything. Is it more that you have to understand how they work than how to build the most powerful combination, or?
Yeah, absolutely. The core progression of the game, and definitely at this point of development, was about understanding the different classes and how they work. And what I wanted most players to get out of it is not to think of these classes as being like, I guess in roguelikes, classes generally are just about playstyle, like different ways you can play the game. For this game, I kind of saw them as levels or something. Like the warrior is very simple, and you get equipment, and you're trying to use big dice on it as much as possible and take as little damage as possible, and that's kind of all there is to it. And that's fine and fun, but then the other classes are supposed to like try to break that, or try to make you think about it differently, or so when the witch comes along, she's actually way weaker than the other classes, especially at first, but she can become much stronger if you build your deck correctly, if you plan your turns correctly, if you get a little bit lucky. And that was, I think, for me,
but it's nice that you can like put another class in the game that you also personally like a lot, and then see how it progresses and how it's taken in by the community. I think that's a nice.
I feel like I've had to defend the witch a lot, especially since the game came out, because she is very unpopular. There's actually a joke in the story that's literally just like, "Oh, you're such a divisive figure." I kind of wish the game hadn't forced you to be so completionist. The design of the game totally makes you do all the characters in all the episodes so that you see everything before you get to see the ending, and I kind of regret that. I think it's the one thing I didn't get right before launch, is to really think about the progression of the game and how you should encounter everything. As a result, I think a lot of people feel like they have to beat the witch, and even if they're not having fun or they just don't like the character, they play it over and over again to try to 100% the game, and that's just miserable. If you approach it differently, I think it's much better.
Yeah, okay, that I understand. You kind of also want to give the freedom to the player to not need to play this character that they don't like. Yeah. But so maybe one also major change is that there are many animations already in the game. Did you all add them yourself? Yes, right?
The animations in this build, this is all my quick pixel art. lots of the characters, like this apprentice guy, for example, is obviously Dungeons and Dragons inspired and roguelike inspired and RPG inspired. But I was starting to get like sick of this as well. Like I wanted to start moving away from that. So at this point, I was thinking a lot about how this becomes a bigger game and turning it into a bigger thing, because it was going quite well. Like the alphas were getting quite popular.
That actually moves perfectly and organically into one of the next questions I have. So when was the point when you decided you want to work with other people and you want to also get other people on board in the development team? Was because you got sick of the graphics, or?
Yeah, it helps that the people I was working with are incredibly good. Like Neve is just such an incredible musician, and Marlo is such an incredible artist, and Justo is like one of the smartest programmers I've ever worked with. And Holly's story is obviously fantastic. That came much later, but yeah, just working with really good people is one of the reasons that went well for me. So, this is version 0.12. This is this introduces Neve's music and Marlo's art for the first time.
Actually, one thing that we didn't get to in the other version, but is also very visible here, is the editor. You added an editor, and that's a big change, actually. And so, what was your thought behind adding the editor? Because we saw most of the time that it's like an exercise, so you can practice how to beat specific enemies, actually. So it's like a range where you can go into and practice the best moves to have against these enemies. Or what was your take on the editor? Why did you edit?
Well, it's really simple, actually. It was just a tool for me. It was literally just so that I could like test out enemies and test out equipment and make sure that everything worked right. And because I was developing this game so much in the open, I just exposed it to the community that was playing the game anyway. And yeah, that went down very well with people. I got a lot of bug reports, like literally about things that could only happen if you are playing the game in the editor and you give yourself a piece of equipment you shouldn't be able to get, and then you do something weird as well on top of that. Loads of bugs that I still haven't fixed, actually, that are related to editor things. Yeah, I just took the philosophy with this game quite early on that I was going to be as open as possible with the development process, and I'm very happy I did that.
So, now this over this screen where you can decide which character you want to choose has also this hard mode toggle here. What was your decision to add in hard mode? Do you think the game is not hard enough, or? Weirdly,
hard mode started as like a panicked, I need to add another feature to this update thing for like, I think it was like version 5 or something. And I was worried that there wasn't enough new stuff in the version and that people on the Discord would be unhappy. So I took a walk and I thought, what's a simple thing I can add that might be fun? And a hard mode was like, I don't know, it seemed like a good way to try out the how elastic the design could be, or something, like how well the game could work if all the enemies have upgraded equipment and more health and things like that. And so it was kind of an experiment I didn't think much about at the time. It ended up being probably the thing that ended up inspiring episodes later. So I'm very glad I did it.
Okay. Yeah, but also you added another class. We didn't talk about the ones that you added earlier, because you also added new ones there, but this one is also a little bit different, like the witch, because it's a robot. And we would like to know a little bit more about the robot, how you added it, and what your thoughts behind it were.
So the robot was the 5th class I made. I made them in this order: the warrior, the thief, inventor, witch, and then the robot. And the first 4 classes are all about equipment and how you think about what you do on each turn and how that's different. So the warrior is like the vanilla rule set, and then the thief steals enemy equipment. The inventor is scrapping equipment every turn, and then the witch has this whole spellbook thing going on. So when I came to think about like a 5th character, I thought, okay, these 4 classes are all about equipment. What can I do that's specifically about dice? What can I do that wouldn't make sense in another game? And so the robot grew out of thinking about mechanics with changing how you get dice to use on your equipment. And I love push your luck games. And I wanted to do some kind of push your luck mechanics, so it seemed natural to do that with the dice-focused character.
It's pretty cool, yeah. I think it's something just to get used to, right? Also because it works very differently than the other classes that use. At first, I'm a little reluctant to play it because I'm like, I don't have full control over what's happening, but it's also a good thing. And I mean, making a dice game all the time is a little bit luck-based, basically. So you can never fully say, oh, this dice throw will be perfect and I will hit all my planned combinations, because you can never really know.
The robot is... I really like the difference in opinion that so many people have about the classes. Like, I've heard all 6 classes being mentioned as people's favorites at different points. And for some people, the robot is like by far the most fun class. They really like it. And then other people like you are, they really don't like the RNG of it. The character really leans into luck in a big way, and things going your way spectacularly and doing double damage for a turn and things just not working out. It's a play style that's not for everyone, but they ended up being a pretty fun character, I think.
But yeah, we are wondering also about the story behind Dicey Dungeons, and when you started to add parts of the story, did you do that with the team, or did you already come up with many parts on your own already? So how did that work, and when did it start flowing into the development?
I didn't have much of the story for a long time. When the team first joined, it was all I really knew about the story is I like Lady Luck as a character. I thought that made sense for a game about dice to have this like godlike figure from lots of different mythologies. But that was kind of it. I just had like lots of different adventurers. They're turned into dice by this Lady Luck character. They have to make their way through the dungeon. That's kind of all I had. And when the team joined, we talked a lot about what we could do and what the possibilities were for the story. I think it was Neve who suggested the game show setting, which I really liked. That just immediately moved it into like a totally different space from most roguelikes. It made Lady Luck as a character make sense as well, like that she's a game show host. I really like that. That was like the first big breakthrough in what we were going to do. Beyond that, then we didn't think about it for a while until we all met up in person. We showed the game at Day of the Devs last November. God, no, 2 Novembers ago. And we talked about the story a lot when we all met up. Yeah, at that point we started to figure out exactly what the arc of the story was, what we were trying to say, who the different characters were. So I got help from my wife, Holly, who is the best writer I know. And she took these vague ideas and turned it into like a really funny story with really compelling characters. And she totally did it as a favor for me.
And often you can also see much of a story in the characters, like in the enemy characters as well. How the equipment they have is really like visible in the character art and stuff like that. How was the workflow there? Did the art come first? And then later on, like the names were added and the combinations, or did you have combinations in mind already and you wanted to have a character tied to that too, and then the art evolved out of this, or?
It was kind of a very accidental process that ended up being really good. So the early alphas had lots of enemy designs that were D&D focused and were like Magic the Gathering inspired. Yeah, lots of really cliched monsters. And by the time the team came together and Marlo and Eve joined, we'd kind of already made the decision, let's move away from that as much as we can and do something different. And Marlo's first big job was enemy design. So she looked at the existing enemies in the game and she thought about, what else could I do with this that isn't like a goblin, right? Or something like that. So there were a few like enemies that I had in there that were moving away from that direction already. Like I had a blowfish and I had like a robot and stupid things like that. But yeah, Marlo is responsible for a lot of the enemy design, and then there was like another back and forth iteration to get her designs into the game, and then Holly did the enemy dialogue and stuff that sort of gave them their personalities. So yeah, it was just that was the process.
That's nice. Yeah, let's move on actually to the next version, which would be the 0.16 version. Because you already also added like localization. So many languages added at once, and then you have this new screen that we see right here, and actually another new character class, right? The Jester.
Yeah, the Jester was definitely the hardest class to figure out. So the starting inspiration for this character was, this game started as a Dream Quest inspired game. I like to be very open about my inspirations. I think that's a good thing. So I wanted this character to be like the most directly inspired Dream Quest character. Like all the other characters are about equipment and dice. This one is going to have a deck of cards. It's going to have like draw mechanics. It's going to be very on the nose about its inspirations. And unfortunately, that kind of didn't work at first. Like, it didn't work for a long time. I had a version of this character in, I think, version 13, version 14 maybe, and they just did not make sense. There were a lot of kind of difficult to explain design problems with combining this like drawing mechanic with the dice. For a long time, I just could not get the character to be fun or balanced in any kind of way.
Cool. So in this version, also, it looks already very similar to the final version, like just from the animations and the level design and the enemies and so on. So how was it for you did you already know that this was close to the thing that you wanted in the end? And how was it then to develop a little further? So how were your last steps like on the finish line, basically?
I think this is around the point in development where I knew what I wanted the game to be, where I had figured it out. We had basically all the art at this point and animations. We knew what all 6 characters were. I had the larger concept for the game laid out with the episodes. So it just, at this point, it sort of turned into a to-do list of like, well, this is what we're going to do. This is what the final game is going to be. Yeah, this version doesn't have a lot of the best stuff in the game, though, weirdly. It doesn't have the parallel universe episodes, which came in the next version, or the first one did. And it doesn't have the bonus round episodes, which ended up being like the main way you replay the game when you get to the end. So like this is like a first draft of what the final version looks like or something.
So with the core mechanics that you wanted in and that you wanted specifically how they are in this version. Yeah, okay. And also you added mods to the editor mode, and also you can like override the CSV file mods. Yeah, and do you also give that to the community, and were they also tinkering around with it and you could see what came out of it?
The people in the Discord were just so very into doing mods even before it was properly supported. So I kind of accidentally leaked the source code for this game, like the early 0.8, 0.9 versions or whatever. It's compiled to JavaScript from my Hacks compiler, but it's supposed to be obfuscated so that a human can't read it. I didn't do that. It's just plain readable. You can just open the .js file and see how everything works. So I had an early version of modders who were just taking the JS file and literally changing the source code to make it do what they wanted to do. And it was really clear that there was an appetite for people who wanted to like come up with their own enemies and do their own takes on different mechanics in the game. And I was really enjoying watching that happen, I guess, and I wanted to support that as much as possible.
Nice.
We use a system in this game called Polymod, which is by Lars Doucette, who he's another hacks programmer. He made the system where you can like have lots of different mods modifying the base game files at the same time, and you can load them in different orders, and the game should still work. And it's just a really nice system, and I kind of inspired the direction I took with this as well.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe a meta question that we internally also had, but do you have a game design document where you keep everything, or?
No.
No?
I do take a lot of notes, but there isn't like one big Word doc or whatever where I've planned everything out. I just have sort of like big picture things that I figure out as I go along. I make a lot of to-do lists, and then I don't always like actually look at them again. I don't know. It's more about getting the ideas down somehow. I don't work with big overall plans usually.
When did you decide that you wanted to have these episodes? And because they get more challenging like the further down you go with each character, right? So it's also like it's a way to kind of master each character in a way. So yeah, when did you decide that you wanted to add episodes, and that was the way you wanted players to interact with the characters?
They took a while to come together, but it felt like the natural extension for how I was designing the game. This game is basically all about take this simple system, how many different ways can you play with it, what are different things you can do with it, what are the variations. And the first set of 6 of those are the different classes, the different characters. But beyond that as well, there's like a lot of interesting stuff you can do within those classes, and that's what I wanted to explore with the episodes. It was a thing that massively increased the scope of the game as well, because it multiplied the content by 6. Which I don't regret though, because some of the best content in the game is hidden in the weirder episodes, like the parallel universe episodes. There's one for each character, which I think is kind of the best work in the game. Then there's weird episodes, like there's an episode for the Jester where instead of finding equipment, after every fight you just take all of the enemy's equipment, all of it, and then you have to delete the stuff everything. So you're just playing through the game and you're literally hoovering up everything you encounter. But your ability for that episode is to just delete stuff you don't want quite cheaply. So you're hoovering up all this equipment, and then you're just like cutting out the stuff you don't want. And by the boss, you should have like this lean deck of carefully curated cards. It's a really fun episode. There's one for the Witch as well that I really like, where the dice always come in the sequence 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you know exactly what you're going to get, and you can plan perfectly. And it just ends up being really fun. So I think that's the one. Countdown for the Witch.
Let's jump to the version 1.0 because there's like a tutorial added. It's interesting that the tutorial was added like quite late, but I also completely understand why it was added that late, because everything kind of has to be finished to be explained, right?
I'm really happy with how the tutorial ended up. I think it helped a lot that we showed this game at so many events, and we got to see people play it, and we got to see what they were confused by. So we got to really hone this tutorial by just seeing people go through it again and again and again. I ended up going for this like YouTube annotation style, I call it, like where you're just playing the game and everything is restricted so that you can only do the right thing, or like some very narrow bands of something that's similar to the right thing. And then the game is reacting like a YouTube video, and it just shows you little pop-ups to say like, this is what's happening, try doing this, and so on. And you never have to click through it exactly, which is, I think, what works.
But we also have some more, let's say, meta or gardening questions even, because with Devolution, it's often about how to grow a game. And does that term even like kind of make sense to you? So do you see a game as a growing process, or even as a plant where you sometimes cut off things and then plant it somewhere else, or is that an analogy that you think is that's stupid?
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. It's definitely how I approach games, is to not think too far ahead, or just have like a fuzzy long-term plan, and then really focus on the details and take it one day at a time and let it be what it wants to be. That makes a lot of sense to me. I can see that.
Cool. And then also in the end, now that you launched the game and everything, but do you see your game as more of a games as a service product, or are you looking forward to finish the game and to move on to the next project without like touching it anymore forever, maybe?
That's been interesting, because in the past I've very much been a believer that once a game is done, it's done. You move on to the next thing, and that it's somehow wrong to mess with it or try to fix like design level problems. Like the game is what it is at a certain point. That's what I used to think, and I'm not really behaving that way anymore. For one thing, I think people no longer expect that. People expect you to work on games forever, and especially with roguelikes, this idea that every update brings new stuff to the game. And I don't know. I guess I can see the logic of it, and I'm doing that. I've been working on the game since it came out last August. We're on 8 patches now and counting. Basically, what I think is it's good for games to be finished, but also I'm going to keep working on this until I run out of things to do. So, obviously I want to move on to new things, and I have ideas for new games, but also there's still a bunch of stuff I want to do for this, and the Switch version isn't out yet. That's the next thing on my mind. I want to make sure that's going to be the first time lots of people play the game, I think, and I want to make sure that's as perfect as it can be. I'm kind of aware that at some point I will be done, and I want to make sure that it's perfect whenever that happens.
And then there is also one more thing that we were wondering about. So you put your game into early access and everything, but was that at some point where the state of early access was harming your development process, and where you wished like, oh, I wish we hadn't gone to early access, and I wish it was still like contained, basically?
I mean, it definitely worked out quite well, but it was stressful to have versions of the game out in the open. And near the end of development, from about version 5.015 on, there were a lot more people playing the game, and it was doing quite well on itch, and YouTubers were covering it and things like that. And it was like, we went into like a long 3-month period of like finishing the game after the last alpha, and it was just really stressful at that point to know that a lot of people were waiting on it. There was a lot of pressure or something. I mean, it's good pressure, really. It's it made the game better, but it was quite difficult.
Okay, and then maybe one last question for now. So to come back to the modding tool, because you invented it basically, as you said, for yourself, mostly, and then you use it, and you also grew it and iterated on it and everything. But then you took it out, and right now it's not in the final build anymore, right?
Oh, it is. So, it is. It's just a secret.
It's a secret.
Yeah, on the title screen, hold down the Shift key, and the credits button turns into the editor button.
What? So cool. We didn't know.
I don't know if I've actually like explained this anywhere. Yeah, there you go. That's been there since launch.
Cool. Okay,
Because
wow.
most of the people in the Discord still wanted to have access to the editor, but also modders at this point don't really use the editor anymore because there are like command line launch arguments for most things now. So if you want to quickly test a piece of equipment, you can just do dicey-dungeons.exe hyphen equipment is equal to broadsword or whatever, and it'll just bring you into a fight and you can make sure it works.
All the secrets here unfolding. That's nice because we also found like this community build editor on GitHub, right? So you set up the project, but
that's official. That's Gusto, who is the programmer for the game with me. He made that for people to make like simple equipment and monster mods, basically. So if you want to make a mod for the game, what you kind of have to do is mess with spreadsheets and add lines to CSV files. And if you get something wrong, it'll probably crash. But if you use this tool, it lets you do like a lot of the basic things that most modders want to do in a safe way that things can't go wrong. So that's tool is still in development. There's a fairly big update coming soon, 1.9, which will have a new version of that tool as well, which I think people are going to enjoy.
Good. I mean, is there anything in particular between the versions where you were always like very, very proud of, or you felt like, okay, now it's the time I make the builds, and then I have this new thing that I want to add in the new version. So when you were in the development process, did you have like these check marks, and then you only like shipped the build or make the build and showed it to the community when you were satisfied with it, or did you also sometimes had situations where you were not so satisfied with the build but still gave it out to the community?
There's some features I was really proud of adding. Like this is a dumb one, but the AI in the game is like I really went into the weeds of internet research on like game AI, and it uses something called Monte Carlo search tree, which is the same algorithm behind those chess computers or whatever. And I spent like 6 weeks just working on this stupid AI system, which is not a good use of time. I could have used something simpler. But once it's in the game now, and
but it's not stupid.
It's just the AI in this game is actually both better than it needs to be, and also like it doesn't really matter because they still do dumb things sometimes. But it's not because the AI is bad; it's because the incentives are bad, and that needs to be tweaked. It's just something I spent ages and ages on.
That's cool. Like we didn't know that the AI was so smart. Yeah, but there's some appeal, right? Also on making a very smart game.
Yeah,
it's just always there.
The advantage of it is that people can like make their own enemies with mods now, and the game's AI just knows how to handle them in a sensible way. Like most of the time, they will do things that make sense.
I think then we covered it all, and for all the people that are watching this, they can also have a look at all these versions that we just had a look at by themselves, right? And maybe some more questions will unfold from there, and will surprise you even. So I would say thank you so much.
So much.
No, my pleasure. This was
taking the time.
This was great. Thank you.